It's time for our panel to consider what's happened here tonight. We're joined by Sam Stein. He's the politics editor for the Daily Beast. Steve McMahon, Democratic strategist and co-founder and CEO of Purple Strategies. Neera Tanden's with us. She's a former senior advisor to President Obama and Hillary Clinton. She's the president of and CEO of the Center for American Progress. And let's just take a look. Let's just take a look at what Donald Trump had to say last night. Donald Trump last night in Kentucky, setting the stakes for voters in Kentucky.
You got to vote, because if you lose, it sends a really bad message. It just sends a bad, and they will build it up. Here's the story. If you win, they're going to make it like ho-hum. And if you lose, they're going to say Trump suffered the greatest defeat in the history of the world. This was the greatest. You can't let that happen to me.
Steve, Donald Trump says he suffered the greatest defeat in the history of the world.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, if I were Mitch McConnell tonight, I'd be a little concerned. If you look at what Donald Trump did in 2016, winning by 30, you look at what happened tonight, you look at your opponent, Amy McGrath, having outraised you in the third quarter, 10.7 million to about 7 million, and you look at your numbers and how you're underwater, and they really look like Matt Bevin's numbers. I think Mitch McConnell's not having a very good night tonight. Donald Trump certainly isn't having a good night tonight. And if I were a Republican senator running for re-election, I'd be real worried about these numbers.
And Neera Tanden, if you're Mitch McConnell and you're thinking, well, you know, no matter how close it gets on that final night before the election, I can have Donald Trump fly into Kentucky and save me. Didn't work this time.
Yeah, not saving last night or today. I think the most important part of tonight is Republican senators considering impeachment have had a strategy, and that strategy is our success depends on Donald Trump. And what they see in one of the reddest states in the country, a state Trump won by 30 points, he has no coattails for Republicans. He has no coattails for Bevins, who really it wasn't just neutral. Bevin tied himself to Donald Trump. And so Bob Costa had some reporting on this earlier. I think they're really looking, Robert Costa, really looking at this in terms of how do they separate themselves. I mean, I think you might see more Republicans potentially think of how do I get away from Trump instead of how do I basically cover for him each and every day. And I think that could prove really important over the next few weeks with the impeachment. Yeah,
Robert Costa of the Washington Post reporting tonight that he spent a lot of today with Republican senators and that they were all watching this election in Kentucky tonight very, very closely, taking that into consideration on how they approach impeachment. I want to show the way the Republicans believed they could win this race in Kentucky. Let's take a look at this ad where the Republicans basically were telling Kentucky voters that only the Republicans could save them from the socialists. Let's watch this.
President Trump and Governor Bevin are making Kentucky great again. But socialists in Washington want to impeach Trump and take us backward. Andy Beshear is part of their radical resistance. Liberal Andy Beshear doesn't share our Kentucky values. Send the socialists a message. Defeat Andy Beshear.
Sam Stein, they sent the socialists the message tonight.
Yeah, they elected him. That ad might have been a little bit over the top, I think, maybe not believable. But I think it gets at something bigger, which is Republicans, and they probably still do, believe that they can do what they did roughly with Brett Kavanaugh in the lead up to the 2018 election, which is nationalize a culturally hotbed issue, turn impeachment into a political positive for them. And I think if there is a takeaway from here, and I'm not sure I think we can extrapolate too far, but I do think if there is a takeaway, it's that impeachment is not necessarily the great mobilizer that Republicans were hoping for among their voters. Certainly, it didn't seem to work in Bevin's favor, even though he tried to weaponize it against Beshear here. Now, of course, we need to keep in mind, Republicans won the Attorney General race. They won the Secretary of State race in Kentucky. So, some of this has to do with the fact that Bevin was a historically hated governor who did really unpopular things, including messing with people's health care. And Beshear was able to use that against him. But I think if you are to nationalize it, you have to point out that he did try to bring Trump in to boost turnout. It didn't work. And he did try to weaponize impeachment against Democrats, and that too didn't work. And that might have a psychic effect on other Republicans nationally and those running in close contests, where they no longer feel like impeachment can be the tool that they use to save their political hide.
Steve, let me just add something to what Sam is saying, which campaign pros know. They brought Donald Trump in to try to pump up Republican turnout. But what campaign professionals know is there's always a danger that what that kind of speaker does is pump up the opposition's turnout. I mean, I knew senators who used to say to other senators, you know, I'll come to your state or stay away from your state, whichever will help you the most. And for liberal Northeastern senators, their deal was, don't worry, I'll stay away from your state because I know an association with me is not helpful to you. Donald Trump went there, and maybe he did pump up turnout on the Democratic side.
I'm actually guessing he did. I mean, one of the reasons that those senators would say that, I'll come in and denounce you or support you depending upon what's most helpful, is because they would look at polling numbers and they would understand if you have a 41% favorable rating in a state, you don't want that person in campaigning for you because 59% of the people don't like that person. And Donald Trump's numbers, you know, even though he won Kentucky by 30, his numbers in Kentucky are not that strong. Mitch McConnell's, as we mentioned earlier, are not that strong. So you bring in a guy to pump you up, he may actually be pulling you down. And he certainly has the potential to turn out votes for Democrats. And you can see in those suburban counties where nominally Republican voters that would support a Republican candidate didn't support Matt Bevin tonight. And that's a warning shot for any Republican. And I think Neera's right. Every Republican in the Senate who's a jury member on this impeachment, if it gets to the Senate, is looking at this saying it might not be as clear or as easy as it looked a week ago, and I might not want to go there.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.